All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Our guest today is Drew Allen. Drew is president and CEO of Grace Technologies, a company recognized for its leadership in electrical safety and predictive maintenance. Under his guidance, Grace has been named one of Iowa's top workplaces for 5 consecutive years. He also founded Maple Studios, a venture studio dedicated to supporting industrial startups. So, Drew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. It's great to be on.
So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
I'll go way back because I think it actually plays into the story. My great uncle on my mom's side was Samuel Finley Breeze Morse, who invented the Morse code and the telegraph. And and so there's been this. He was a great artist and also a legendary inventor. And that thread has traveled through my dad and a bit through me. Samuel Morse, I think, had 6 patents. My dad, I think, just got his 9th or 10th. I've only got 1, so I've got a little bit of ways to go. My youngest son, his name is Samuel Breeze Allen after that. And so we have this kind of long history of invention in my family. And that kind of led my dad to never want to work for anyone and start up a company in the industrial space. And being a youngin', well, your dad's, at the time, it wasn't called a startup, but being a youngin' during the startup years gave me kind of a front row seat to the industrial world. After college, I worked for 3M doing business development in Asia. And then I came back into our company on the international side of things and took over all of our international business development offerings and then rose through the sales ranks. And then I took over as CEO in January of 2021. It's given me a unique perspective because we're a manufacturer. I get to see how manufacturing technologies operate in our facility, but also we work with the largest manufacturers in the world. So the likes of Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark and the big 3, Tesla and SpaceX and all the huge mine sites. Every major industrial process that kind of goes on in the country, I've been able to visit one of those factories. I was adding up maybe how many factories I visited over the last 12 years. It's in the thousands. And so it's given me a front row seat to what's really happening in these factories and the evolution of industrial technology in general.
Wow, that's amazing. Pretty impressive as far as being in the top workplaces for 5 consecutive years.
We're the only manufacturer, by the way, in the small business category with that designation.
Wow. And it's such a good process. And that's what I tell my clients, even to go through the process, whether or not you get the award, it sets you on the track to do that. What in an industry that faces every manufacturing audience that I speak to deals with workforce challenges, what are some of the strategies that you have implemented that helps you attract and retain your skilled talent?
So first, we legitimately care about our employees. So I know that sounds trite, but I don't really like using the family term. I like more of the high performance team term. And everyone wants to work with the people that really excel because there's this compounding effect when you're around greatness, right? Is you're likely to become great. And I think that happens on the factory floor and also in the executive ranks. And so I'm a big believer in selection bias and making sure that you're setting up those selection biases to benefit your company in the right way. Now, whatever my selection biases are, so I want people who are quick to action. I want people who are really innovative. I want people who can execute. These kind of things maybe aren't right for everyone's environment, but I think they've been right in our environment. And the people who succeed here at Grace tend to really want to experiment and take action quickly. And so that's something that we really prize. Beyond that, hey, we have happy hour at 4 o'clock on Thursdays. I think that's a really a great thing. But we do a lot of different programs and a lot of things that just, I would say, are out of the norm for most companies. I think another thing that I probably discount because I'm here every day that people just notice is like how clean of a facility we have. And I think cleanliness is next to godliness, especially in an industrial facility. And so if you can't take pride in the facility that you're working in, you're likely not to reinvest. It sends a message, right? If you go into a dirty hotel, that sends a really negative message. I think if you go into a dirty industrial facility, that also sends a poor message. And typically areas that aren't clean aren't safe. And safety is a huge determining factor of productivity in a facility, and probably one of the leading indicators of both productivity and quality. There's a gentleman named Ron Moore who's actually, when he goes in and does a reliability assessment, the first thing that he does is he makes the entire team deep clean the facility. And he won't even start doing any other reliability assessments until the facility is like spick and span. And I think in a factory environment, those kind of little message senders, if you will, are really critical.
God, you brought up so many points. I remember a couple of years ago on this podcast, I had a guy on, and he was one of the strategies that they used in interviewing managers to come into the plant is they would intentionally leave like a Coke can or paper towel or something on the floor, and they would walk by it. And if the manager didn't pick it up, just walked right by it, then they were like, this person isn't for us. So
I'm stealing that. That's a great idea.
yeah, I know, isn't it though? Because it sends a message, because for so long manufacturing has been seen as dark, dirty, and dangerous. And when you can turn around that perception that people have. A couple of the other things that you said that I like is you said it's obvious that we really like our employees. And there's so many people that they're almost like, how can we fake that so that we can get people to come on board? Is no, if you're not willing to really like and care about the people. And I also really like the term that selection bias, because what that is saying to me is that you are hiring more slowly to make sure you get the right people on the bus versus just checking boxes. So talk a little bit about your particular selection bias and how that has helped you to keep good people.
Yeah, so it definitely depends on the role, but we tend to not hire perfectionists because in a small company, you can't be, you got to follow that 80-20 rule. And so you got to put 80% of or the vast majority of your effort where you're going to get 80% of the outcome. Yep. So we're always looking for that optimization problem. We find that just perfectionists tend to can't move in an agile manner. And so so that's really important. Another kind of mental model that I employ when I'm looking for people is I'm looking for the core competency that's in the middle. So let me say a firmware engineer, right? So if I'm hiring a firmware engineer, I want them highly competent in firmware, but I also want them competent, but not as highly competent on the actual PCB layouts, right? And then I want them a little bit competent on the mechanical package that PCB is actually going into. And then I need them like slightly less competent about the manufacturing process that it all goes through. But so you have these kind of like concentric circles of competency, and good teams have overlap in those competencies. You can't have these like highly specialized roles anymore. One of the themes I think is we're moving away from factory efficiency into a future of factory adaptability and resilience. And the way that you build resiliency is you have redundancy in a system. Right? Now, you don't need the same level of redundancy if you have a core competency, but you need some overlap in that system so that people are able to flex. And it also gives them other paths to grow into that gives them like a better career progression as well. And another kind of like thing I'm always looking for is I'm looking for that curiosity spark So whether that's our production folks, our engineering team, our marketing team, our product development folks, I'm always looking for people who are asking questions, who are like trying to learn and educate themselves. I think there's a difference between training and education. And while you can train someone, you can't force education upon someone. And I think the determination of education is really the level of curiosity of the individual, especially in an environment where we're living in a time of incredible informational advantage. If you're not curious and constantly looking into things, you're limiting your potential for growth.
And such a big difference too between a smaller company that people really can flex because things can change so quickly versus a larger organization where they just don't have the capacity to do that. So again, hiring more slowly and firing more quickly because toxic people will bring you down really quickly too.
Absolutely. I would argue, though, that the best companies are the 300-pound gorillas that can ballet dance. And you look at what's happening at NVIDIA, and they're highly specialized people in NVIDIA for sure. But their ability to all of a sudden shift from gaming to AI,
Right.
that's a monumental shift. But if you think about it in my kind of concentric circle models, it makes total sense. They understand vector GPUs. And so they continually were looking at application spaces that kind of grew out of that core competency. And I think that really the best large companies have that ability. They also tend to follow a more decentralized approach and focus on the autonomy of the individual. I think Reed Hastings at Netflix has talked about this substantially, about autonomy and responsibility. And you really have to hire people who you trust to be able to be like fully autonomous and give them great decision-making skills. Another thing that we do at Grace is we have the $500 rule. If there's a problem and it's less than $500 to fix it, just do it. Put on your expense report, it's approved. I think Ritz-Carlton's $2,000 or something.
Right.
Usually less than, usually it's like a couple $100 and the problem is solved, and I never even hear about it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So speaking of innovations in electrical safety and predictive maintenance, what are some of the recent advances that you're seeing that are making the biggest advancement in manufacturing operations with the clients that you're working with?
Yeah. So there's still this core problem in industrial environments where there aren't sensors on everything. We hear about this data glut, but like the vast majority of motors in a factory today don't have any monitoring on them. So you still have to, at the end of the day, have some sensing signal to be able to actually make a determination based on. So we're still in the early days, I think, of implementing these IIoT systems on large scale and industrial facilities. You all of a sudden, so we still need to deploy sensing hardware. Once the sensing hardware is deployed, that ability to take that data set and be able to run it through algorithms, prediction algorithms, regression analysis, anomaly detection, defect classification, all of these things open up a wide variety of doors and efficiency improvements. Obviously, AI is a big trend. I think some facilities have been quicker to adopt it than others, but I think the ones that are really successful have been really early adopters. It comes to mind the Koch brothers have this scientific management approach, and they've been really early in on the IIoT kind of trend. And they have entire monitoring centers for their facilities around the globe, based in Atlanta, Georgia. And they have teams of data analysts who are constantly sifting through data and trying to optimize their operations. And so when you think about that, okay, the future already exists if you know where to look. I think that's a really impressive model at a very large scale.
Well, yeah, and when we talk about AI, we are not putting that genie in the back in the bottle. It's going at such an exponential rate right now as far as just its capabilities that people who aren't willing to even consider it or play around with it or find ways to use it are definitely going to be the ones that are left behind.
Yeah. One other thing kind of on the electrical safety space, the vast majority of safety implementations tend to be reactive. And the only kind of proactive safety is typically we look at it through training and procedures, right? We don't actually have a lot of toolkits for leading indicators of safety progress. We just released a new wearable that lights up, vibrates, and beeps at you when you get close to voltage. And so I anticipate these kind of wearable technologies, potentially vision systems in factories, pre-alerting people when there's potential safety hazards that are going to occur. I think that's going to be a very big trend in the future because really our safety toolbox is pretty limited. And humans are the last ones to get sensed. There's definitely arguments about Big Brother. But at the end of the day, I think if you can coalesce around the goal of we want people to get home at the end of the day in hopefully a better condition than they left, I think that's a mission that everyone can get on with. And the smart facilities are starting to really pay attention to those types of ideas. There's this idea of the risk control hierarchy, elimination, substitution, awareness. The last level of defense is PPE. Oftentimes we jump to PPE first before going through the rest of the risk control hierarchy. And so if we can eliminate those potentials before they even occur, I think that's obviously the holy grail.
Yeah, so funny because last year I got a new car. I got a Subaru. And from a safety standpoint, it's truly one of the most annoying cars that I've ever driven. And I go a little bit over the line. It's beeping at me. It's beeping at me if I'm getting too close or anything. But the tie-in, when you're talking about being an industrial plant, having that thought of letting your employees know that we care about you enough to send you home safely at night with all your digits in place, and to be able to show that, even though it can be a little annoying if you're getting close to something, if you're getting beeped or buzzed or whatever, that you're getting close to voltage, it's still a sign that leadership cares enough about that employee to take care of them. And that says a lot about the organization. And unfortunately, a lot of companies aren't doing that yet.
There's also this, so there's that kind of thing that we've discussed. There's also another theme about safety by design. If you can actually design the safety into the system to begin with, you're not hacking at it as an afterthought. I think additionally, with the rise of robotics and the rise of potentially humanoid robots, we're shifting from not just a safety by design, but like also a design for machine maintenance or robotic maintenance, where these tasks that we've already done this in automotive for years, right? Where there was dangerous tasks that humans couldn't accomplish, and so they brought robots in to make it safer. I think that we're going to start to see that in what I would call balance of plant assets or other maintenance tasks that need to be filled. The other thing that's driving that is just the labor shortage. Right. Without getting too political, obviously, the current kind of immigration situation is likely to cause a more severe kind of labor shortage in the short term, which only leads to potential larger orders for the robot manufacturers and in kind of implementation of those robotic systems to perform maintenance tasks that are either dangerous for humans, hard for humans, or you don't have humans for.
And again, it just shows you the value of creating the type of workplace culture where people want to stay, because with the worker shortage, they have so many options, not only in manufacturing, but with Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and becoming a YouTube influencer, for goodness sake. They don't have to stay if they are not feeling valued and appreciated.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And speaking of, again, connecting with your employees, I know you're actively involved in leadership development through YPO Iowa. What lessons from this experience have shaped really how you lead at Grace and how you continue to drive improvement in your manufacturing environment?
That's a broad question. Let me think. One thing I've learned is the quality of your company is largely determined by the quality of your leadership, and the quality of your leadership is really determined by the quality of you yourself as a leader. And so I've never seen the company be able to transform without the leadership transforming. And for me, I really feel like that's really started with myself. And I've spent a lot of time trying to become a better leader, trying to put more tools in my toolbox. And I think that a lot of companies want to phone it in, and a lot of leaders aren't willing to put in the hard work. And even like, how often are leaders really getting a full 360, an anonymous 360 out from their teams? Right. This is something that we try to do regularly for myself as well as the rest of my leadership team. We want to know, how can we be better? I think a lot of leaders are afraid to ask, and they're afraid to open up that Pandora's box. But you have to create a culture of risk taking where, hey, you're not this guru. You're a person that's on a development path, and you have to accept people's criticisms and be able to understand what's keeping you from leading the best that you can. So I think that kind of having that growth mentality as a leader really is probably the most important kind of core foundation. If you're just like sending your team to the leadership courses and you're not going yourself, it's probably a little fishy, I'd say.
And I share that with my clients all the time. If they're sending their people to a leadership or some kind of program, and the managers are in back on their computers checking email, thinking they're being all slick and stuff, they're not. They're employees. No. And it's work. And it's also hard to hear the areas that you need to improve, because we all think that we are all that in a bag of chips. But when employees see something and you make it safe enough for them to share it with you, then everybody's going to win.
Yeah, not technically like a leadership thing per se, but I realized when ChatGPT came out, I needed to figure out this AI thing. And so I started doing some digging about hackathons. So I reluctantly signed up our CTO and some of our developers and myself to go out and do a hackathon in San Francisco with Craft Ventures. And this was like, oh man, was this a year and a half or 2 years ago? And I'm telling you, I learned more in that, man, it was 48 or 72 hours that we had to come up with a product that wasn't developed and launch it and demo it on the last day. And I don't know how often leaders put themselves in that position of just being like a complete idiot of, hey, we're going to try something. But I'll tell you what, it set our company off on a path for AI. We launched a kind of, we call it Foreman XAI. It was a early kind of generation of a chatbot to help maintenance professionals be able to like diagnose problems going on their machinery. But it taught us so much, and it really elevated my understanding of AI as well as like my ability to use it. And so every time now I'm looking at a problem in the company, I'm able to lean on that experience and those skills and be able to solve it in a new way. And I don't think, without putting me in that kind of pressure cooker, it would have, we were working till 2 a.m. trying to watch this thing. It was absolutely incredible. But I think that those are the kind of experiences you have to put yourself in as a leader in order to kind of move the ball forward sometimes.
When I think about how that solidified the relationship that you had with the people that you went through that experience with.
We're tight. We want to kill each other a little bit at the end of it, but I actually really was able to understand their technical skills in a different way. I was also able to understand what they were nervous about and how to like assuage that, and just what's keeping us from taking action right now. I don't understand this. I'm afraid of how this is going to work. Hey, guess what? We're here having fun. If this thing flops or fails, it's fine. Let's just try it. That whole culture of experimentation is really critical for all companies, but you look at manufacturing environments, and we got to be able to experiment faster and provide sandboxes for people to try things out, because we don't always know where those experiments are going to lead. And continuous improvement has been a mainstay since the Toyota way, but I think that continuous improvement is one thing, but let's try it out quickly, and let's make that improvement now, not 8 weeks from now.
Well, and along those same lines, let's talk a little bit about Maple Studios, because when you're talking about manufacturing startups that are often struggling with access to resources, mentorship, funding, what are some of the things that motivated you to establish Maple Studios, and then how is it helping innovators to bring their ideas to market?
So the Quad Cities is a unique environment, as is every town. There's two major employers here in town. John Deere, we're the home of John Deere. And we're also the home to the Rock Island Arsenal, which is like the Joint Munitions Command.
Okay.
And for a long time, the success in town has basically hinged on whether or not the Arsenal is going to close or get a new project or whatever the thing is, or how John Deere is doing. And I just felt that we had to create better diversity here in town and provide a ladder for people to actually be able to develop their ideas and their concepts. I don't want to get too into the specifics, but there was a startup in town doing a pretty cool product. And instead of following that iterative startup approach, they ended up investing like $4 million into a manufacturing facility before they even had like product market fit. Of course, we get called in through some friends. Hey, Drew, can you guys go talk to these guys and see if you can help them? At that point, it was too fully baked to be able to save it.
Right.
And I just, the mistakes that they made were so obvious to anyone who's spent any time in the startup incubator space about product market fit testing, MVP, and hey, don't worry about your COGS on the initial rounds. Like even if you're selling the product at a loss on the initial kind of go, you need to be able to test out that product market fit. And I will tell you, it would have costed a lot less than $4 million to get it to product market fit. And so that kind of failure, I think every like large scale failure that you have like that in a town like this probably dissuades at least 10 people from doing something. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to create an environment where people were given the resources to be able to succeed. Because starting a venture, I think 8% success rate or something. So if we can do anything to improve the ideas coming up, that's why we were interested.
Oh, interesting. It's so funny because when you said about them investing $4 million into it without a market fit, I just went back to became a shark on Shark Tank, and I went, oh no.
It was like absolutely predictable. And it's like, how did you guys not? When I found out that the investor was like a dentist and had no industrial experience and was so like, and wanted them to spend money on the manufacturer. I just felt really bad that like somehow in town, maybe given the right resources, given the right coaching, this thing could have been really successful, and it just didn't work.
As we're getting to the end of our time together, you also have a podcast, the Factory Futurist podcast, that has given you a front row seat to some of the biggest ideas in manufacturing. What's one conversation or insight that has really changed the way you think about the future of the industry?
Without getting like too technical, I think digital control of power is going to be a major game changer. And the idea of power distribution equipment being smart. As we're talking about the electrification of the US and the amount of money that's going to be spent, the more digital control power that we're able to exert I think it will be a significant game changer. Right now, we have a bunch of dumb circuit breakers. And if we're able to control that power a lot smarter, all of a sudden you're going to see costs decrease because you can only take so much cost out of a mechanical device.
Right.
If you start thinking about the world through a software lens instead of thinking about the world through a mechanical lens, it opens up an entire realm of possibilities. It leads to much better sensing. So you're able to predict problems before they happen. I think that's going to be a major play. We do have an investment in the space. It's called Atom Power. They're out of Charlotte. Unfortunately, they were not in the Maple Studios. I wish, but we were actively, I think it's going to be a big thing.
Awesome. So we covered so much ground today. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish that I did, or final thoughts that you would like to share this afternoon?
Yeah, I want to touch, I have a pretty broad international exposure, and so I travel internationally all the time. right now, when it comes to automation, China is eating our lunch. And one of the things that I found about automation in Asia is that usually when we're designing systems in the US, we're thinking like we want these systems to last for 30 years. In Asia, they're thinking, I want this system to last for 2 to 3 years because I know that the technology is going to get that much better in the next cycle of Moore's law.
Okay.
And so what that actually enables is it enables a much better iterative approach. So potentially, instead of designing a system that you think is going to last forever, I would really exhort manufacturers to be on quicker iteration cycles. If we can just iterate quicker as a country, speed and time is like the ultimate commodity. And we have to be faster iterating. The adoption cycles for industrial technology is just so slow. And in Asia, that's just not the case. And so if we want to maintain our position as America for being a leading kind of manufacturer of high-tech stuff, we're going to have to iterate as fast as the software guys. And we're going to have to flex in new ways. And I think that's a really critical insight that I just don't feel like anyone is really talking about.
So if people did want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Look me up on LinkedIn, Drew Allen, Grace Technologies. Feel free to email me, drewa@gracetechnologies.com.
All right. Drew, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.